generations left for us lessons and inspirations on how particular unjust systems were uprooted. He invites us to pick up, and I quote here, pick up what the previous generation left for us, to join our actions up across time and space, even with those we have never met and may never know. He asks us to see this current struggle for justice as part of a multi-generational project, one that we may only have a chance to begin to construct, and that, and I quote him, may only be completed by our descendants. Quote. This, however, must not hinder us from undertaking our current struggle. I leave you with a poem that is dear to my heart, because it was one that my mother used to assign to her students learning English at the University of Puerto Rico, and which she taught to me at a young age. It is the poem by Langston Hughes titled Freedom. Freedom will not come today, this year, nor ever through compromise and fear. I have as much right as the other fellow has to stand on my 2 feet and own the land. I tire so of hearing people say, let things take their course. Tomorrow is another day. I do not need my freedom when I'm dead.
I'm gonna try the other camera.
I cannot live on tomorrow's bread. Freedom is a strong seed planted in a great need. I live here too. I want my freedom just as you. And now I would like to ask my colleague and friend Liz Savchenko to introduce to us our esteemed keynote speaker for today. Liz is founding co-director of the Humanities Action Lab here at Rutgers-Newark, and we are very fortunate to have Liz do the work that Hal does here for the university and for our community.
Thank you, and I want to echo all of Mayte's thanks for the incredible group of people who made all of this happen. I mean, any of you who have organized events know how much goes into it, and to have your experience be generative and smooth takes an enormous amount of work. I also want to be the only one to who's in a position to thank Mayte, because the person thanking the other people never gets thanked themselves. She has been it's been a real pleasure to collaborate with her on this, and I think the fruits of her leadership in this are really evident in the room. But what I'm so pleased to be able to do right now is introduce Dr. Davarian L. Baldwin, who is frighteningly far from the stage right now. But I know he'll make his way over as I'm talking. This colleague and friend is an internationally recognized historian, cultural critic, and public advocate. He's the Paul E. Raether Distinguished Professor of American Studies and founding director of the Smart Cities Research Lab at Trinity College nearby in Hartford. His academic and political commitments have focused on global cities, and particularly the diverse and marginalized communities that struggle to maintain sustainable lives in urban locales. Baldwin is the award-winning author of several books, most recently In the Shadow of the Ivory Tower. I hope that you will avail yourself of a copy along with the other great books that are there on the table. In the Shadow of the Ivory Tower, How Universities Are Plundering Our Cities. He also served as the consultant and text author for The World of the Harlem Renaissance, a jigsaw puzzle, which my co-director, Regina Campbell, and Regina Campbell, my co-director, brought into an event that we had in this room for people to sort of just take a moment and kind of heal through. We didn't know that we would be connected with the author of the text of that, so it's a wonderful thing. His commentaries and opinions have been featured in numerous outlets from NBC News, BBC, and Hulu, to USA Today, The Washington Post, and Time Magazine. He was named a 2022 Freedom Scholar by the Marguerite Casey Foundation for his work in racial and economic justice. I've had the great privilege of getting to know Dr. Baldwin over the last few years as together we've been with other colleagues coordinating the Renewal Project, a national coalition, and folks are here today that you'll hear from that coalition that seeks to remember and redress the historical harms of university-driven displacement and dispossession from work and renewal. Through teaching, research, and public memory activities, we're trying to leverage the power of collective action to develop strategies for repair. So you'll hear all about that this afternoon. Dr. Baldwin has been, over these last couple of years that we've been working together, a real personal inspiration. I find myself doing the what would Dr. Baldwin do in any situation, and channeling my inner Davarian, and things have really turned around since I started doing that, so I recommend it. But I'm especially grateful to have you here in this moment, when both, as Mayte discussed, universities and their communities are under attack. So this is a moment where we are going to need each other more than ever. And what I really appreciate about learning and working with Dr. Baldwin is that while he is unflinching in confronting universities' past harms, especially in the era of urban renewal, the focus is on figuring out how to bring university and community actors together to build a new partnership. And sort of this approach of building solidarity based on honesty and accountability, I think is going to be critical for surviving what's to come. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Baldwin.
Good morning. All right. How's everybody doing? Good. It's really a blessing and an honor to be here this morning. Some of aging myself, probably about 15 years ago, I was spending a lot of time down in Sciences-Newark, probably coming down here every week. Almost ended up here. So it is really a pleasure. I mean, a lot has changed in that time, but including this building. It really is a pleasure and an honor to be here, to have this particular conversation, because there are ways in which Rutgers-Newark has been a national leader in community engagement. And with that in mind, it can be the instigator for pushing us all even further. So if we can just have a moment of silence for all of the communities that once lived where this campus now sits. So I just wanted to set the tone for the import of this conversation that you will feel at an even deeper level in the next panels. I know that people have things to do, we live here, but I really implore you to stay for the next panel, which is kind of a call and response to this national discussion and very local specific conversations about how this story has played itself out. I'm gonna talk about some of it, but if you want the real on it, stay. But the conversation for today and this morning is reparations and the university. So we know that the conversation around reparations goes back at least to the point of emancipation, both here in the US and in places like Haiti, but it was actually the imperialists and slaveholders who were first seeking reparations for their lost property at the point of abolition, if you can dig that. But the conversation around those who have been the target of enslavement, of Jim Crow, and their vision of reparations goes back at least 60 years. But there was a sea change in the moment of 2020, what we like to call the Black Summer of 2020, where decades-long conversations that have been maintained by, those community historians that come in with mimeographed papers in a plastic bag at all of your meetings, and you roll your eyes or you're like, okay, here they come, but kept the receipts. And now those receipts have borne fruit to the point where we are having national conversations about reparations at a both national and global scale. This is important because universities have historically been seen as the point of convention, of convening, where we can, the power of the universities, where we can have these conversations about reparations. But very rarely up until that point were we looking at universities not just as the point for convening these conversations, but the university as the cause for the need to have these conversations. That universities have been hiding in plain sight as a central actor in these conversations for far too long. I know some of you already started to squirm your chairs, like, oh, here we go, right? But I've been a affiliate of universities all my life, an employee of them for 30 years. I love universities, And it's with that love that I read the social mission statements. I read the action plans. I read the commitments. And with that in sight, we say, okay, let's live up to their full capacity and beyond what we can personally see in the present. It's that love that propels me forward to think about visions of repair. Y'all still with me?
Yeah.
Okay. So, as I said before, the summer 2020 is really important for the way in which it didn't create conversations, but it makes the scale of these conversations around reparations and repair. And most importantly for this conversation, this discussion, it turned the vision not just as universities being the problem solver on these broader conversations, but the universities having a hand and a role in what is needed, why repair is even needed as an agent of harm. So in this time period, more colleges and universities began to push to acknowledge the history of their entanglements with various forms of white supremacy. In particular, we're talking about enslavement. Students and community members began to build out on the pioneering work of former Brown University President Ruth Simmons and scholars like Craig Wilder and his magisterial text, Ebony and Ivy, which boldly stated that America's colonial era colleges, quote, stood beside China as a pillar of civilization built on bondage. Following the lead of these pioneers, especially after that summer 2020, schools began to come out of their archives to rename buildings and create various kinds of memorials, statues, commissions, working papers that acknowledge the intimate relationship between their ivory towers and the history of Black bondage. We can consider the research consortium out of UVA called Universities Studying Slavery as a kind of consolidation of these local level research consortiums that were taking place all over the country. Also the Lemon Project at William & Mary that we will. Conversations around universities and reparations have moved us forward. Again, we can also look beyond the page at the arresting memorials. For example, the Slavery Memorial, recognizing Brown's connection to the transatlantic slave trade. Or the memorial at UVA, spearheaded by my good colleague from graduate school, Mabel Wilson, scholar and architect at Columbia University, helping to build out the memorial to enslaved laborers at UVA. Powerful, right? So text and memorialization. In just Maryland alone, Johns Hopkins University launched its Hard Histories at Hopkins project, only to discover that its own abolitionist namesake, Johns Hopkins, is a landmark across the New Brunswick campus, showing direct ties between the university and the political economy of slavery. So taking all of this in consideration, it is important to understand and recognize the strides that we have made in this conversation around recognition, reconciliation, and the key word here, repair. But I took some inventory, me personally, on this moment. And it seemed that universities, leaders started becoming a bit too, let me go back, I don't want y'all to read that, but I want you to hear me. I want you to focus on me, Liz. I can do that with her, we good. So it seemed that university leaders were becoming a bit too eager to concede higher education's ties to U.S. slavery. After 50 years of denial, of kicking out those community historians, all of a sudden in 2020, okay, yeah, we did that. And we're gonna have a convening and a moment and a moment of silence and a conversation, a memorial and a research paper. Talk about our ties to slavery. These various research bodies seemed to be engaging in what some consider a ceremony of bloodletting, or what Lakota scholar Megan Redshirt Shaw has called the ceremony of acknowledgement. There was this initial set of discovery meetings, right? Surprise, surprise, every damn university in America has ties to slavery. But we're gonna have a discovery moment. Oh my goodness. Okay, I didn't know. Which is followed by the creation of standing committees. Now, if anybody has any activist history, you know what the elders say. If you want to kill something dead, create a committee. That generates official reports. At best, there may be apologies, books, and memorials. But there is also this historical bait and switch. Because you can say, oh, wow, slavery, yeah. Point to a long ago slave past. Look at that way down there. So you can then say, oh my goodness, look how far we have come. I just started to notice this in the all of a sudden explosive acknowledgement after decades of denial. But you know, there were these bits and pieces. I'm a 20th century, partially, part of my life. There were these bits of engagement that seemed to go simply beyond the ceremony of acknowledgement. In 2016, investigative journalists discovered which sold 272 enslaved people in 1838 just to keep Georgetown University from going bankrupt. Students, clap it up for students. Students took that knowledge, that investigative knowledge, and went to the administration that was lukewarm about doing anything. So then the students took that knowledge and found the descendants of those original 272 enslaved individuals and pushed for a $1 billion fund through the increasing of student activity fees by $27.20 a year in memory of the enslaved, to create scholarship programs that exist to this day. Now, they didn't get the $1 billion, but the point here is that student-driven activism and engagement converted administrative ambivalence and converted it into action beyond simply the ceremony of acknowledgement. That same year, a group of graduate students created the Reparations at the University of Chicago. They wanted University of Chicago, to recognize its slave roots, which they continue to deny this to this day. They're like, well, that was the old U Chicago. It was in a fire. We are the new University of Chicago. See how that works, right? Same board of trustees, same endowment, same students, but that's not us. So just keep that in mind, right? So this group of graduates, they're doing, you know, a lot of research and study for their own, you know, professional development, but taking the time out against students to say, we demand a reparations vision and package for those and this history of the enslaved that helped make U Chicago possible. But not just for slavery, but the university's hand in restrictive covenants, demolitions, and the campus police profiling of residents that continues to this very day. Their demands range from Black coursework and the increase of Black faculty to a community board that oversees campus expansion projects in neighborhoods surrounding the campus and calling for the disarmament of campus police. And you can imagine that that has not gone anywhere within the university, but we persist. And this is where, because I am a scholar of Chicago, this is where my work entered the discussion, because most of the conversation was around slavery. Projects that tried to push things forward, they were more materialist, died dead. And then I was like, but wait a minute, we talk about the 20th century, talk about, the colonial era. But there are harms that existed in the 20th century when it comes from higher education. There are many moments of university-driven racial harm in our much more recent past. We can talk about the Moral Act of 1862 and 1890. All of these land grant universities, so not the Ivies, their endowments came from so-called free land that was then converted into the endowments for these land grant universities. But then through, again, investigative journalism, we find out that this land was not empty. It was indigenous land that was seized to make way for land grant and help power forward this political vision called land back organizing. And then we want to move forward, if that's not enough, we can talk about the ways in which universities use racially restrictive covenants in the 30s and 40s to fund neighborhood organizations to maintain boundaries around increasing Black and brown communities that were living too close to university real estate and making the property values go down just by their presence. But let's move even a little bit further forward and talk about the era of the 1950s and 60s and the period of urban renewal. This period that was called urban renewal, what James Baldwin and community members of the country called Negro removal. In this period, right around 1949, at the inception of the Federal Housing Act of 49, universities that were stuck in the city at a period that was beginning to create suburbanization. Capital was flying to the periphery. Universities were too big to follow. So 14 universities led by, again, the University of Chicago got together and said, well, we can't move, but how can we protect our interests? Us, NYU, Johns Hopkins, Yale, UC Berkeley, and a number of others, they got together and said, we are going to lobby the federal government to create an amendment to the Federal Housing Act of 1949 that will create policy for our own protection. So this is the period where urban renewal was already going on. If you know Pete Buttigieg and others made popular that neighborhoods where the Black and brown neighborhoods were demolished to make bridges and tunnels and roadways so white folks in the suburbs could come into the city and go to work and shop and go back home without ever touching ground. We know that story. But what fewer people know about is that in this period when universities saw this and couldn't follow the prosperity, they created an amendment to the Housing Act of 49 10 years later in 1959. This amendment stated that if a university is at the front of an urban renewal project led by a university, for every dollar that the city contributes, the federal government will double that and contribute $2. So what do you think what happened? Cities all over the country began to partner with universities to create urban renewal projects, and higher education became the friendly face of urban renewal. Did you notice? This policy was shorthanded as the 112 credits program. And by the 1960s, there were at least 154 projects under this banner proposed. They didn't all go through, but proposed with direct consequences that you will hear more about today. So this was something, my research in the Challenge at Ivy Tower was focused on the present and how universities using research parks and innovation districts were controlling labor and land and policing and healthcare. But my point in this work, because again, a part-time historian, was to say, well, where does this come from? What are the roots of this? And I found that today's innovation and prosperity at universities sat on top of bodies and blood. And the very same neighborhoods and actual blocks where today's innovation districts and parks and research developments and partnerships with biotech labs and medtech firms was sitting on the land that was neighborhoods, Black and brown communities that were demolished through the 112 Credits Program or related urban renewal projects to make way for today's prosperity. That's the connection. Is that clear? Okay. So at this point, my research, because we all love to do our research and make claims about social impact, right? Even if it ain't much. Social impact means being published. But I wrote the book in a popular format for a general press audience to reach people. And by the grace of God, it did. That when the book came out, a brother reached out to me in Philly. It was like, brother, I just got out of prison. And I lived in what was once the Black Bottom neighborhood that's now University City, built by University of Pennsylvania and Drexel and the hospitals. Brother, you are telling my story. You told the story. But the research is cute, but we need your advocacy. We need you to get up out the tower and hit these streets. And I did. From this came my Smart Cities Research Lab, which grew out of 15 years of research conducted for the book. And at the lab, we research and consult on best practices for building out equitable urban communities, special emphasis on university-driven development. In fact, I just got back 2 days ago from Rotterdam. One of the most diverse cities in the world because of colonialism, obviously, right? But what are universities there doing? They are moving into the South, where the Black and brown folks are. And someone read the book, found out about the lab, and said, brother, you are telling our story. Again, come help us. So I just got back. So the point here is repair can happen in many ways, and reconciliation can happen in many ways. And the point here is that research matters, but it must be in service to transformation, in service to the people. So at the lab, collectively, we call for school reparations from universities' hand in slavery, indigenous land seizures, Jim Crow in the South, and urban renewal practices and today's policing practices. But we also call for payments in lieu of taxes because university properties are property tax exempt, which increases the mortgages for the aunties and uncles and grandmamas that live near the neighborhoods, and also the rental housing. And it also takes money away from things like public schools and public infrastructure, the more a university expands into your neighborhood. We call on schools to preserve a portion of their tax-exempt endowments for community development projects. All schools are currently required to spend 5% of their endowments to maintain tax-exempt status. We're saying take another 3% and spend on community-based projects. That is small for a multi-billion-dollar or million-dollar endowment. Small endowments are half a billion. Take another 3%. Do community investment work. That will be transformative for the host communities that surround you. We call for university medical centers who will receive an additional tax exemption. But their tax exemption is in exchange for they're required to offer indigent care to the surrounding communities. But what? They get to self-report. So what you think happened? It don't happen, right? So I'm working with another organization, the Social Mission Alliance, which is a coordination of university medical and healthcare professionals and students to begin to create a dashboard where we evaluate the community benefits that these schools actually offer and call on a reinstitution of university medical school rankings based on their actual community investments. Repair. We call on schools to attach a community benefits agreement to any campus expansion project that can include low-wage workforce and affordable housing mandates, zip code-specific jobs, job training, scholarships, and access to campus facilities. We watch schools throw away food daily and demand that they package the food into healthy meals for communities in need. I've mentioned this all over the country. Has any university actually picked up the mantle and answered the call? No. But a medical student, again at UPenn, heard this talk 2 years ago with his own labor, got together with the Democratic Socialists of Philadelphia, worked with the Black and brown women who work in the cafeteria, as always Black and brown women. On their Fridays, they take the food that they're going to throw away, repackage it, put it into meals. They went on a social media platform, got some coolers for bicycles, and take the food to shelters and community centers. That's low-hanging fruit, and schools still resist doing something like that. You got to throw the food away anyway. Why wouldn't you think of packaging the healthy meals? And we watch the jurisdiction of university police extend into our communities by engaging in racial profiling and a two-tiered system that absolves students, committing crimes, sending this to the dean of students, because they want them to keep paying their tuition, and yet criminalizing residents, because you want parents and investors to know that campus in its expanding area is safe for business, is good for business. A two-tiered police. I know some of y'all put your hands down, right? We in knowledge space, right? We're here to learn, right? Put your head up. Hear what I'm saying. This is a knowledge space. This is research. If you need that mantle to be comfortable. This is research. Therefore, we call at the lab, we call on police abolition, campus police abolition. Why? Because the research says that 9 out of 10 police calls do not require an armed response. That's what the research says. And if we think about then what are the jobs they're doing? Domestic violence, trauma care, health care, housing insecurity. What institution is best equipped to provide food and housing and trauma care? What school? What institution? What institution? A university. So if anybody can engage, any sector in America can engage in police abolition, it's campus police. That's repair. Based on the strengths of what you already do. And so these are just a few of the solutions and frameworks that we, our small but mighty lab, have developed and are working with community groups and some university partners, not enough, to begin thinking creatively and expansively about repair. Just to give you a sense of how this worked out in real time, those are the ideas. What have been the manifestations? During 2021 and 2022, a coalition of labor unions, city alders, residents, and students in New Haven, Connecticut, asked me in the lab to join forces in their fight against Yale University, the biggest employer, landowner, and private police force over the entire, they have jurisdiction of the entire city of New Haven, Yale PD. And they saw, the coalition, New Haven Rising, saw that their public schools sucked. And they saw that public school funding comes from what? Property taxes. And they saw that the biggest property holder in the city was, or who was? Yale. That's Yale, pay your fair share. Pay your fair share. And so they institute this program, policy, public art. This is the $14 million that Yale contributes. The blue line is the $40 billion endowment that Yale. So public art, I went down there, we door knocked, teach-ins, parties, yes, parties, food giveaways, DJs. We had university in the street to the point that we created allies in the city by showing what university could be in the community through critique. I said in my lecture, stop shouting at Yale. The university is right here in this space of learning, of protest, agitation. We are giving out food. We are doing teach-ins. We are playing music. We are doing yoga and wellness. We are doing everything that the university should be doing, like the encampments we're doing. Yeah, I said it. Interfaith prayer, teaching, solar-powered spaces, medical encampments, book sharing, yoga. All the things the university should be doing was being done at the protest and in the encampments. And we won. They will never say this, the city will never say this, the city swooped in and took credit. But after 2 years of agitation, Yale, after decades of never having to come to the table because universities by state law are tax exempt, agreed to contribute an additional $52 million to the city budget of New Haven, Connecticut. We did. Another example, again, research. This is a map that I might have showed you earlier. This is a map of what was once the Black Bottom community in West Philadelphia that became University City. In 2021 and 2022, the one piece of affordable housing that you might have heard is the University Townhomes that was in this area was being bought up by a private developer because this area is hot in terms of universities there, medical centers are there, so who do you think wants to be there? Third-party investors, med tech, bioscience, pharmaceutical companies, software companies, all want to be there because it's a hot spot matrix between universities, researchers, cheap graduate student labor, property, tax exempt land where they can do their work, and the university provides becomes a tax shelter. Read the book, read the book. I ain't got time to go into it now, right? This is a hotspot for development. They want to push out all public offerings. So as a part of the protest, the lab came down, worked with the community. We found this old map where we found that in the 60s, there was sit-ins and protests when at the inception of University City. And because of the coalition of activists, there actually had been an agreement. See all the areas in dark? You see them? Do you see them? Okay, okay. These were supposed to be affordable housing projects that the city agreed upon in '68 when the project first came online because of student community agitation. But when we get to the present, the only thing that existed that came with that was the university townhomes. People didn't know this. They found out because of, say with me, research. Research. So we made this available in public. And by the grace of Councilwoman Jamie Gauthier, she took this research and put together the city's first ever inclusionary housing overlay on the entire area. So that because of the research, as a form of repair, any new development in the area had to have 20% of its units be at the affordable rate. Because of the research, repair. Now let's be clear, this pilot project was not what we had hoped it to be. You know anything about area median income? Never at the median income of the city, but the entire metropolitan area, which includes very wealthy areas and very impoverished areas. So the AMI that they agreed upon was still too high for the people that really needed property housing in the area. But the point here is that research got people, research and activism together, got people to move. Gave them the opportunity to imagine, understand a different past that can propel forward a new and vibrant future. This is important. And so coming out of this kind of work, this is what gave life to what you're going to hear about in a little bit later. the Renewal Project. This coalition between my lab, the Humanities Action Lab here at Sciences-Newark, yes, you are part of this, a leader in this, and the University of Minnesota. They changed it. What's the name now? It's not Minnesota Transform anymore. What's the new name of the coalition? Right. So partner at the University of Minnesota got together, and we are exploring and we are creating a research and engagement project about higher education's largely untold role in the devastating history of urban renewal in the US. Projects that we have here today, for example, like that in Athens, Georgia. They're here today. You'll hear more about them today. Creative placemaking. Community of Lindentown was the milestone made way for student housing at the University of Georgia. The repair response has been, and there's Ms. Hattie right there who's in the room, a renaming ceremony right in the heart of the campus. Years of fighting, and you were saying, no, hell no. They did that, right? We also have the organization, the Coalition of Displaced Orarians in Denver, Colorado, who are here today as well. And their stories go back a little bit longer. At the point of demolishing the Aurora neighborhood to make way for the Aurora campus, they fought and won scholarships for those displaced and their descendants. And they also won to hold on to some of the buildings to be preserved and to be reused by the campus. Now the buildings got preserved, but the scholarships didn't. And so we're fighting for that and more. But these are just two of the 8 teams that we have all over the country that are engaging in projects of research, curriculum development, creative placemaking, and using that academic scholarly work, because academic work happens in many places, not just the university, and letting it serve various visions and projects of repair. So this is the work that we have been able to do. The clearest manifestation of that work came out a couple of years ago, in 2023, 2 years ago to be exact, when again, a group of journalists at ProPublica discovered that the shoe lane, that Christopher Newport University in Newport News, Virginia, was built on top of an historically Black middle-class neighborhood called Shoe Lane. So they discovered this story, and like, wait a minute, is this just a Newport News story? No. They began to investigate Virginia. It happened in Charlottesville, Virginia as well. It happened in other cities in Virginia. But wait a minute, is this just a Virginia story? No. And thankfully somebody said, gotta talk to them folks up north at the Renewal Project. So then we helped them work on their reportage. They got syndicated both in the Chronicle of Higher Education, article in Essence Magazine. Then they put together a documentary that you can watch on YouTube today called Uprooted, about the story. That got watched by State Representative Dolores McGuinn in Virginia. She was moved by this to the point where she built a commission, a state commission, to study the history of university-driven urban renewal, demolition, displacement, and is beginning to put together a program for financial compensation and repair for those families. Again, yes, thank you. This is what research can do, where we are not just simply the site where scholarship is done, but we have a direct hand in repairing our own direct harms in the urban and regional ecosystem. Why is this important right now? You've all mentioned it. Mayte and Liz have mentioned it. This is important because right now, higher education is under attack. For years, universities tried to nibble around the edges and do liberal reforms to keep people quiet on one side, and then surveil and expunge people out of the campus to keep people quiet on the other side. And they ain't made nobody happy. Everybody pissed. So the point here is that what the university has done is, by being lukewarm about its social mission, offer some little scholarships, doing some cleanup days, right? Doing some outreach, but not doing real hard scrabble investments. They open the door to the very people that should be their allies have now become their enemies. So when the president says F higher education, the very people that should be your allies like, yeah, F higher education. We've experienced demolition. We've experienced arm's length distance conversations. We've experienced their elitism, their half-handed engagement. So forget universities. If universities that lean heavily into the social mission that they put on websites and papers all the time, and done housing investment, done food investment, done equitable safety approaches, done decent healthcare, all mandated in ways that they've ignored, they never would have been under attack in the way that they are. But now we have an opportunity for a true reckoning. Universities are out of ideas. They tried to nibble and do surveillance lists on people during the Gaza encampments and hand them over to the world. And people still don't like y'all. Wasn't enough. Y'all still woke. So why not be really woke and invest in community and build out solidarity and create a vision of repair that engages the harms of your past as a foundation for building a different future. It's the only path. And in the ground that we see, we can build a vision of democracy with the university at the center in ways that we have not yet seen. Thank you. All right, we're doing this. Questions, thoughts, reflections.
Yeah. So you and I should pass around the mic. So,
I know that was a lot, so take a minute to breathe, you know?
raise your hand and we can pass around. Oh, thank you.
Yes.
Oh, I'm first. Am I first?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm there like behind me.
Oh, good. Sorry.
I just want to say, Dr. Baldwin, amazing talk. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm sure we all loved it. I just wanted to ask though, a lot of the examples you put up of reparations, they always come at like sort of like a compromise where it's like
Sure.
they ask for not even that much, and
Yeah.
they always give us less
Right.
than that. I just want to ask, like, how do you maintain like your spirit through that? Because it just seems
Sure.
very like like demoralizing, just asking for just a little bit back and losing it all.
It's a great question. I don't look at it in that way in the sense that, especially when it comes to, for example, our pilot victories. State law says that universities don't get anything, right? They are not required to offer anything. They are by law tax exempt. So the fact that we even got to the table when they could have just stiff-armed us, right, is a powerful feat. Is $50 million a drop in the bucket of a $40 billion endowment? Yes. But for me, it's the ground that we are tilling to do more. We're not going to stop. We know that we're on the right side of history. Right now, the story of Tulane, it starts with that reparations campaign with the commission, the state commission. But what's come from that is that the city, which has its direct hands in the harms, doesn't like the smoke from the state, and they create their own commission to kind of like protect themselves. And they're trying to sign up the 5 remainder families to agree to a kind of quick deal to get the state off their back. Those 5 families invited me down to begin to put together a robust plan. So I look at that as an opportunity to build something more. We got, as young people, we got the receipts, right? One of the homes of the 5 remaining families is surrounded on one side by the Greek Row, by the other side by student residential homes, and in the front by a parking lot. Some of the most depressing shit you'll ever see, right? But sitting with that family, so I went down there, and the woman who lives there, her whole family came from all over the state of Virginia to come and talk to me and say, we ain't going nowhere. We believe. and we need you to help us. It's things like that that keep me going. That we all have the investment and the aspiration to have socially impactful work as scholars. And again, a lot of times that just means research, maybe a website. But this work is real. And, we all love to say when you write a book, what's your next book? What's your next book? But doing this work, I could do this until retirement. I could end my professional career on this work. It is that impactful. It is that material. It is that engaging with real people, real ideas, real experiences. And we have seen transformation, not what we hope to see, but we've seen transformation. So it's those communities, it's projects like the Renewal Project that we're just starting out now, and the people that you'll hear from in a few minutes. It's those experiences that keep because this is the university that we all thought that we were going to enter into. When we all went to school and said, oh, we have conversations and engagement. We got here and we realized that it ain't that. It's these conversations that this is the university I always imagined I'd be in. So I'm happy to be here. Thank you for that question.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Yes.
Hello,
Hey.
hello, Mr. Baldwin. Again, thank you so much for the presentation.
Thank you.
So my question comes with a slight brief comment. Is like as a researcher myself,
Mhm.
when I was recently graduated, but when I was at SUNY Purchase,
Yeah.
I led the research to it was a personal project, but they'd like to help found evidence that the SUNY Purchase property was once built on a plantation, and that held enslaved people. And when you're talking about which of course the school had various reactions to that research,
Right.
and yeah, learning firsthand that like when you're talking about the various student initiatives that actually led to change from the research,
Yeah.
that a lot of that work relied on students
Sure.
to do a lot of labor
Yes.
during their time as students.
Yep.
Right. That's
Which is the
unrewarded.
best education though. But yes, unrewarded, uncompensated. Yep.
Yeah, unrewarded, uncompensated, sometimes even punished.
Yep.
Right. Within, if it's like an undergrad, for example,
Mhm.
could be like 2 to 4 years of education, 2
Right.
to 4 years of time. How do you, from your experience,
Yeah.
have you seen students able to like actually get change done
Yeah.
and keep it going
Yeah.
when it's in such an exhausting
Yeah.
like space and punishing space?
No, that's a good question. And the way to keep it going, I'm gonna put a finger back in here that it is the most protected and secure faculty on campus that are the most apathetic.
Thank you very much.
Because I remember the process where we were going through the process, like, oh yeah, but when I get tenured, I'm gonna do this. And when I get tenured, meaning, some level, it ain't real protection, but some level of protection. You can't just it don't mean a lifetime. We get told it means a lifetime guarantee for a job. It don't mean that. It means you can't be fired without cause. That's all it means. But the point is that when I get tenured, I'm gonna do this. When I get tenured, I'm gonna do that. But you still realize that whoever you were before tenure, to a pretty high degree, not completely, whoever you were before tenure is what you're gonna be after tenure. Sorry to say it. Right? So my point here is that we need to kick in. Because administrations, not all, but administrations, they bank on the 4-year cycle. That you'll create momentum, a groundswell, and then you're gonna graduate. And then it's a whole new all over again. But we're there sometimes 10, 15, 20 years. We are the connective tissues. But history shows us that the most vulnerable are the ones who are in the front lines of battles. Disenfranchised graduate students. The graduate student strike wave that happened 2 years ago. Right? Some of the most vulnerable workers in cities, on campuses, they're the ones at the front line. So how do we maintain is that everybody can kick in? And the reason why is because this discussion is not just academic. The reason why I call it the Shadow of the Ivory Tower, my last chapter is called The Ivory Tower is Dead, because it's not just about teaching and learning. Universities are the center of today's political economy as the biggest landholders, policing agents, low-wage, not faculty, low-wage employers, healthcare providers in cities and towns all across the country. The battles that we wage on these campuses have ripple effects for the political economy of our entire nation. This is why we got to kick in. It ain't just about us. So this has got to be a collective experience from campus to community. That's the only way that we will win and you don't get debilitated. So thanks for the question.
Thank you so much.
Hello.
Thank you so much for speaking and coming here. I just have a question specifically about Rutgers, but about other schools that are similar.
Okay.
Rutgers is a school that has multiple campuses across the state of New Jersey.
Yeah.
Because of that, I find that many activities that are done for community building are not shared amongst the campuses.
Right.
For example, Newark has a lot of outreach programs that are not on other campuses. What do you think can be done to unify these efforts across campuses to have a broader reach?
Yeah. I mean, the point here is that we have to model sometimes our enemies. There is a network at the administrative level, between Newark, New Brunswick, and Camden. They talk together all the time. In some ways, we have to model that from below, have our own networks. So for example, when the battle, I get the name wrong, but I was a part of this in New Brunswick when that campus joined forces with Robert Wood Johnson to demolish the school, Lincoln Elementary, right? That was a canary in the coal mine about what Rutgers was going to be doing across its campuses in terms of using education as a laundering mechanism for real estate development that we see in New Brunswick, we see in Newark, and we definitely see in Camden, the most disenfranchised campus of the three. So the same coalitions that are taking place at the administrative level have to be mirrored at the bottom, at the grassroots, at the community level. There must be conversation. So I was also a part at New Brunswick of the AAUP's community benefits approach to labor, saying that we need to have community benefits for labor organizing. It's not just about wages and work conditions. This is about these people live in these communities. It's about housing. It's about food security. It's all these things. We have to start building cooperations and coalitions that mirror. So universities will tell you that all they do is teach and research while they own a multi-million-dollar real estate portfolio and are buying up and partnering with hospitals. Our coalitions must actually mirror the ways in which universities actually function and work. That's got to happen. That's not a complete answer to what you're saying. But I'm saying we've got to believe what we see instead of what we hear. I'll start with that. Yeah.
I think this is our last question, yeah.
I'm wondering if you see a correlation or some connection between the universities, not newly found, but I think right now overemphasis on STEM.
Oh, yeah.
And de-emphasis of the humanities and the social sciences.
Right.
Because it seems to me that the more we emphasize, I mean, there's nothing wrong with research in the STEM.
Right.
But what I think is happening is that universities are being turned into vocational sites. You come, you get a degree.
Right.
But when we're talking about research and we're thinking about thinking, it seems to me that it's the humanities and the social sciences and these areas where you're going to get people like you and where people, but more and more, it's like I come, I get a job and I'm gonna find I'm gonna find my income and my salary in the STEM sources. And quite frankly, I know for a fact that here at Rutgers, in terms of faculty, in terms of resources, the money for social sciences and the money for humanities is diminishing, while so much is going into STEM.
Right. I mean, it's a great point, and it's something I talk about in the book as well. Is that this is a business decision and a financial calculation. So you're a historian, you'll appreciate this, that in the 60s and 70s, as universities were trying to reorient themselves, the 80s, trying to reorient themselves because states were contributing less money to budgets. Universities would celebrate that we are going to become not the vocational schools, we're going to become the new smokestacks. Smokestacks, these are not just vocational schools. These are today's factories. Not for the future, but for right now, because the greatest industries in bioscience and med tech and software and military defense weaponry, they see the profits in partnering with universities in the STEM world, because these laboratories it reduces their overhead costs when they put their research and development on a campus. And when they employ graduate students, that if they directly employ with a bachelor's degree, they have to pay more, but can pay less as graduate students because they are considered apprentices. So the actual existing framework of a university is profoundly lucrative for third-party corporate investors to do their R&D in the STEM world here. This is why you hear the word innovation all over the place. Innovation simply means those units that have the greater capacity to bring their research to market. This is why every university now has a technology transfer unit, meaning their sole focus is designed to how do you monetize R&D and bring it to the market so it can come back to the university in the form of royalties for IP. This is the new playbook. It's not for fun, it's not for play, it's not for jokes. This is the framework. And the schools that are able to do it just simply wish they could do it better. That's the reality we serve. So this is the reason why more money is going into STEM than it is into these other areas like humanities and social science. Let's be clear. Technology transfer isn't even that big of a money maker. Most of it creates more debt. But the idea is that if one discovery can hit the jackpot, it's going to be more transformative than, in their mind, 300 literature and history TAs and faculty. Yet, it's precisely the work that we do that gives them the educational cover that triggers public dollars to do the private work they do behind closed doors. If it was for us, they wouldn't have that cover. We give them the cover pretending to be an educational institution. That triggers tax exemption, triggers federal dollars, triggers financial and property protections, being educational status. We provide that. So this is a business model. And if you're not up on game, it's happening right all around you.
Once again, yes, thank you for joining us today. We have lunch right now, and you can come and help yourselves. And then after, actually about 45 minutes after lunch, we have Dr. Baldwin's books here for everyone. Please take a copy. They are for all of you free. So please don't leave without the copy of the book and have lunch.
Hi, one more announcement also, which is that please, as Dr. Baldwin implored you before, don't miss the afternoon, because we have guests who have traveled really far to come and share their stories with you about what it feels and looks like to both have this